Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's Friday, so it must be Kinetics USA weekly show, Onwards and Upwards, everything that a healthcare worker needs to know about coming to live and work in the United States. I am your host, Tanya Friedman, CEO of Kinetics USA, the #1 company for direct hire for healthcare workers coming to the United States to live their American dream. If you are interested in coming to the United States, please apply to the Kinetics USA website, and our team are waiting on hand right now as we speak to speak to you and see how we can make your American dream a reality. Over the years, we have helped thousands of healthcare workers come to the United States, and we would love to help you to make this a reality. Today's show is about immigration. Every month we have our monthly legal Q&A with our expert legal team. And today I am joined by Mike Hammond. Hi, Mike. Welcome.
Hi, Tanya. How are you?
Good, and you?
Good.
And Anshu Anand is joining us as well. Hi, Anshu. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I know that both Anshu and Mike are no strangers to Onwards and Upwards, but I think for those viewers who are joining us for the first time, Mike and Anshu, if you can maybe do a quick introduction and just give a little bit of background about yourself. Let's start with Anshu. Ladies first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Anshu Anand. I am a partner at Masola Unkenholt. Generally, Chris is in this hot seat. Today, I'm taking his spot. I'm not sure I'll be as funny as he is, but so I've actually been practicing in the immigration space for about 10 years now, and our firm is based in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Thank you, Anshu. And we love working with the Masillo team. We've worked with them for many, many years. And we are happy to have Anshu on the show today. Mike, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Mike Hammond, and I have been practicing immigration law for a really long time. Been doing healthcare immigration for about 25 years. I am also based here in Cincinnati, and not to provide too much personal information about why Chris is not here today, but he's working on getting a haircut. So I got mine yesterday. He's getting it today. It takes both of us an extremely long time. We go to the same barber, and that's where he's at today. So, and we're glad you're filling in for you.
You have missed your vacation in life. You should have been in Comedy Central. Well, thank you for joining us, Mike. We love working with the Hammond Group as well. We have also worked with the Hammond Group for many years, brought through thousands of nurses together. So we're really excited to have a show for you today. This is your chance, everybody, to ask your burning immigration questions. If you are wanting to know about the visa bulletin, if you want to know about the timelines for a green card, if you want to know about that terrible R word, retrogression, rumors have been flying around the last few weeks. If you are coming on a TN visa and want to know about that, if you're a med tech and want to know how it works, this is the show for you. I can see the questions are coming fast and furious. So I'm going to stop talking and start taking questions from the chat. If you are watching today, please put into the chat your name and where you're watching from. We love to see our viewers all over the world, and please put your questions into the chat. My desk is full of questions, and we'll try and get through as many as we can in the next hour. All right, so Ricardo, you were first. Ricardo is asking, morning, an update on the visa bulletin. Will the rest of the world possibly regress this year? Anshu, there's a lot of concern about retrogression. Obviously, in the 2008 time period, there was a very long retrogression. For those viewers who don't know what regression is, maybe you could explain, first of all, what retrogression is, and then your thoughts on a possible upcoming retrogression and what this would mean.
Sure. So I think the way I like to summarize it in very simple terms is retrogression happens when the demand is more than the supply. So the demand for the visas is more than the allocated regulatory allotments for the visas. So remember, keep in mind that the employment-based category, there are only 140,000 employment-based visas that are allocated each year. And so we've been lucky, I think, with, I think the only positive that came out of COVID was that there were a lot of family-based cases that were not utilized. And so in the last 2-3 years, we've seen like this influx of the employment-based numbers, almost up to like almost 200,000, because when the rule is when the family-based cases are not utilized, then that number trickles down into the employment-based category. So, so that's generally kind of how that the visa bulletin works, and where our numbers are looking now in terms of retrogression. I know there's a lot of concern about that. You know, this March visa bulletin, it was uneventful in the sense that like the dates were the same as the February visa bulletin. But having said that, there was this kind of very foreboding note in the March visa bulletin talking about retrogression. And I can tell you this, Chris and I were actually in DC doing some lobbying work a couple of weeks ago, and we actually met with a Department of State official and just had coffee with this individual and tried to get a sense of how things are going to move along. His office is aware of it. They don't necessarily have an answer right now, but what they are trying to do is they are trying to allocate the visas monthly so that we don't have a retrogression early on. So it's kind of an unknown right now. I don't have a more clear answer, but my sense from this official was that we're okay right now, but that they are working on this and they are monitoring this on their end.
Okay, so that's hot off the press update, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that. It's really scary for any nurse that or any healthcare worker when they hear the word retrogression. Mike, what is your advice to anybody at this time, based on what Anshu's saying, that it's unclear? Obviously, the State Department are monitoring this. The government are aware of this. I mean, we've even seen in the news, I saw a video recently with Mitt Romney talking about that, one of the prominent senators. What is your advice to any healthcare worker at this time with this kind of word overhang right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, the immediate thing is that what you can control is your part of your case. And so getting your documents together, getting an interview scheduled as quickly as possible, having everything together for that interview, et cetera. So wherever you stage you're in your case right now, do that part as quickly as you can, because I am of the opinion that retrogression is inevitable. And so it is going to come. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I believe. I think the demand is simply so great. And as Anshu pointed out, we've had a tremendous influx of supply that's very limited extra this year and going to be no extra for fiscal year 2024. So I think when you continue to have increased demand and the supply doesn't change, and in our case actually is being reduced, it's inevitable to have that. So that's the first thing, is do everything you can with your case now. Second thing to recognize is that there are a lot of activity going on behind the scenes. As Anshu mentioned, her and Chris and a group of individuals and representatives from healthcare companies have been in DC over the last several weeks. There's a group going back next week for some additional meetings. And there are a lot of people, including Kinetics, AMN, working, and a lot of the hospital facilities that you're being recruited for and placed through Kinetics and AMN are participating as well and talking to their representatives, their senators, their congressmen about a potential solution when retrogression comes. So I don't think, keep in mind, the economic climate is significantly different in the US today than it was in 2008 and 2009, when there was widespread recession everywhere and so there was no appetite at that time to address retrogression. Whereas right now there's huge demand for healthcare workers. That does not appear to be letting up at all. So I think there is some appetite for some relief. We've certainly seen relief in some other areas. Agricultural workers and some other temporary workers have had some relief within the last 18 months, which bodes well for you as healthcare workers, that there is a hope, that there is a real feeling, not just this pie in the sky, well, maybe things will someday get better, but a real feeling that things are going to be addressed if and when retrogression does hit. So I would certainly not lose hope at all, but work as quickly as you can right now.
Okay, so that is really, really good advice and some important points to highlight there. As Mike said, the last time we had this lengthy retrogression, the macro environment, the world environment was very different because we had the Great Recession and there was really no appetite to carve out any legislation for healthcare workers. Right now, what we're seeing in the United States is explosive demand for healthcare workers, registered nurses, med techs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very different environment, which is a very important point. And as Mike said, don't lose hope on that. The other is to do what you can. So right now, if you are planning to take the NCLEX, if you've got the NCLEX and you've got an employer, but you don't yet have the English exam, or you haven't got your visa screen, those are the things that are in your control. Collect your documents, work efficiently with with the kinetics team or whichever company you're working with to be able to get through those things that you can control. So I think really good advice there. Anshu, before we move on from retrogression, I've got a lot of questions that are coming through about that. Can you break down for the onwards and upwards viewers, if retrogression, as Mike said, probably when retrogression does hit, if you are at different stages in the green card process, in the consular green card process, how will that impact you? Can you maybe break that down a little bit? So if, for example, today it hit, right? We don't want to think that, but let's just use that as an example. If today retrogression hit, if you were at the consulate, what would happen? If you had an I-140 approved, what would happen? If you were at the NVC stage, DS-260, what would happen? If you were, could you file? If you just passed your NCLEX and got an employer, could you file? Could you maybe break down for us each stage of the consular green card process, how retrogression might impact?
Okay. So I think the one thing I would say, and I would agree with my colleague, is to say that, like, no matter what, even if a retrogression happens, that you should continue on with your process, meaning make sure you are taking the exams that you need to take. Make sure that you are getting your healthcare worker certificate so that if a retrogression happens, you can still file an I-140. That is not an issue. You can still be able to file the I-140, which once you file the I-140, then you will get what's called a priority date. That priority date will help solidify your queue in line. Okay, so let's start with that first. Make sure you're going through, taking your exams, doing what you need to do so that you can at least get that 140 started. And then that way you get your priority date and you get in line. Okay, so then after that, if a retrogression happens and now you're in the NVC process, if your priority date is not current, then it's kind of at a standstill. So you won't get your fee bill, which means you won't be able to pay it, which means you won't be able to go on to the DS-260 stage and submit your civil documents and then get your interview. So keeping that in mind, go ahead and get that 140 approved, but just know that if the priority date retrogresses, that you will, and your priority date is not current on that visa bulletin, you will not be able to channel through that NVC process. Now, if you are at the NVC stage and fee bills have been issued and it retrogresses, my sense is, again, I think everyone takes a different take on this, but I would not pay the fee bills only because you can't really move forward. And so the best thing to do is just to wait until your priority date becomes current again. because and then I think most importantly, work with the attorney and the employer to ensure that the fee bill is being updated, because that fee bill has kind of a timeline on it for like a year. So in order to keep your case current at the NBC, your employer, your attorney needs to reach out to the NBC to make sure that the case is current. And we typically do that once a year, just to let the NBC know that, hey, yes, we are still interested in moving forward, but not at this time because because I'm not current, and therefore we would want to wait. So, and so the next stage is again the DS-260, and then the interview again. If there's retrogression and your party date is current, can't really move forward with those stages either.
Okay. So that's really helpful just for people to kind of have because I think there's, when you hear retrogression, there's a lot of fear, but it's really important to educate yourself about what would happen. And I think you've really laid out really nicely the different stages and what would happen if you were at a different stage in that process if retrogression hit. Mike, last question on retrogression. If you are coming on a TN visa, or if you are coming on a student visa, or if you are, for example, a medtech coming on an H1, is there any impact from a retrogression perspective? Because that's another question that we've been getting.
Yeah, let's take the good news first. If you're a medtech, a PT, an OT, or any worker that's coming on an H1, retrogression has no significant impact to you. It means that your green card case will take longer to actually achieve. However, your H1 will continue to be extended, ultimately indefinitely. There are individuals here in the U.S., most notably from India, engineers, software workers, et cetera, who are facing lines of 10, 15 years long, and they're continuing to work on their H1. So for med techs, no significant impact. For TNs, as long as retrogression does not last more than 3 years, so the line, the queue that Anshu talked about, that you get with your party date being established, as long as it's not more than 3 years from the time that party date's being established until the time your party date's current, then that will have basically no impact on you. The hard one is the F1 students, because F1 students are given only a 1-year OPT EAD card when they graduate. If retrogression lasts longer than 1 year, then they would be unable to stay here in the U.S. and continue employment. So the biggest impact, so no impact on H1s, limited to no impact on TNs, significant impact to F1 OPT EAD holders.
All right, Mike. Thank you, Mike. So at least people will know what to expect and how to think about it. But I think at this stage, the message is don't panic. There is a lot of work in the United States being done to maybe carve out some kind of a solution for healthcare workers. Retrogression is probably inevitable, but the macro environment is very different to what it was in 2008, 2009. And at the end of the day, you've got to control what you can control. And that is to get your NCLEX done, get your documents in, work with your employer, work with Kinetics, with AMN, with any company that you're working with, get your English done, your visa screen, and so on, and make sure that those things you can control, you are getting done as quickly and as promptly as possible. And at the end of the day, everybody's intention here is to get you to the United States. So if it does take a little bit longer, so be it. But at the end of the day, our goal is to get you here. All right, so let's move on from retrogression. That was a big segment, but there's a lot of questions about it. So I really wanted to give the information to our viewers and make sure that everybody has their questions answered. All right, so moving on to other questions. Anoop has a question. Hi, I've been scheduled an interview for April 24th, but I have received visa screen certificate. I think Anoop is meaning he hasn't received visa screen certificate yet. It has been 3.5 months since I applied for visa screening. So if I have to reschedule my interview date, is there any deadline before how many days I should apply for rescheduling interview date? Anoop, Anshu, sorry, what should Anoop do in that situation?
So, I first, what I would say is that different companies will usually advise you differently on this, because it's really dependent upon how long the consulate will take. Will the consulate allow you to, go to the interview and then issue you what's called a 221G, and be able to submit that visa screen certificate afterwards. I think another question is why he doesn't have the visa screen. Is it because he hasn't passed a major component of the visa screen certificate, which is that IELTS exam? I think if that's the case, then you should probably reschedule. But if it's just like a process delay where you just haven't received it, but you've met all of the requirements for the certificate, then I think that's where you want to maybe speak to your case manager, your employer, your attorney, and determine the best course of action. Because remember, it's so hard just to get these interviews. And so, having to reschedule them is something that it's a decision you shouldn't be making on your own. It's something that you should do collectively with the employer and the attorney.
Okay, thank you, Anshu. So Anup, we hope that you will get your visa screen soon, because we know that can be very stressful. Irene is asking, how long is NVC currently taking to schedule interviews? And I see we get that question a lot. Camille is asking that question. Mike, what is your current take on the time that the NVC is taking to schedule interviews at the consulates?
Well, the amount of time it's taken to get a interview scheduled at a consulate is going to vary by consulate. Not only because of their workload, so some consulates are going to be faster than other consulates, but also because of how they're choosing to schedule the interviews. So we see some interviews that are scheduled in 6 weeks, but 3 months is not terribly unusual right now. So I'd say a range of that, 6 weeks to 3 months, maybe even a little touch less than the 3 months. Is pretty typical right now for getting an interview.
Okay, so that's the kind of average time. Anshu, any comments on that? Any difference or any specific consulates that you're seeing maybe a longer time frame?
I think London historically is slower. So I haven't seen them really ramping up as I would like for them to. And then I think I did speak to one of my paralegal staff the other day, and I think it was UAE maybe. It's taking a little longer, 6 to 8 months. So I've noticed that. But other than that, your sub-Saharan, I know a lot of individuals would have issues in the sub-Saharan area with the U.S. embassies, and I feel like that has gotten a little bit better. We're seeing about 5 to 7 months, roughly.
Okay, so I think on average, as Mike said, the timing, but as Andrew mentioned as well, there are some specific consulates that are more backed up than others. I know we have a question here from Michael and Irene for the Nairobi, Kenya consulate, and we definitely have seen a very big backlog at that particular consulate. And just to let you know that as members of the AAIHR, there's a lot of work being done to try and rectify that and catch up the backlog in those areas. We know it's very, very frustrating. Okay, Huda is asking about English. Can you start the visa screen? So Huda, please reach out to your kinetics case specialist and they will help you with that process. We have a lot of information that we can provide you on the timing of when to apply for the visa screen. Jamie is asking, are you open for direct hire positions in New York? We are, Jamie. So please go ahead and apply to the Kinetics USA website, and our team are on hand to help you with the location specifically in New York that you would like to go to. Gary has a question. Is it okay to add my wife dependent during the DS-260 stage? I'm thinking also to add her if I already have an interview date. By the way, my dependent has a pending F11 family category petition. She's been DQ'd since last year, but as far as I know, it might take longer for her to wait as there is slow movement for the family visa category right now. Your insights are appreciated. Andrew. So two questions there from Gary. At what point should he add his wife, and which do you think is going to come through first, the family petition or his employment petition?
So let's start first with the question about the family petition. I would need more specifics about the priority date on the family-based petition. But I do want to mention that having a family-based petition and also an employment-based petition should not have any bearing on the employment-based case. You are allowed legally to have both cases pending at the embassy. So that's the first thing. And I'm sorry, the second question was when he should add. I think this is a personal decision. I think the ideal advice is, the earlier, the better. Given that he has told us he's at the DS-260 stage, my recommendation is, if he adds her at the DS-260 stage, there is the likelihood that his case will then be delayed because now they will have to issue the fee bill, which the fee bills are taking 4 to 6 weeks. So, and then the wife will have to channel through the process as well. So generally, I would say if they're at the DS-260 stage, maybe not. But given that fee bills are being issued quicker than before, that we go ahead and add her. But just know that if you do that, it is going to delay your case. And that's the biggest kind of takeaway from that.
Okay, so that's a very thoughtful answer. Thank you for your insights.
Can I add something
to
that? I think this, assuming that, Gary, you were married before your process started, and this was not a marriage that occurred afterwards, I think this brings up a really important point, that this type of strategy and what was going to work best for you and your family should have been covered with the attorney and your case manager prior to your I-140 being filed. So the delay that Anshu talked about in getting a new fee bill could have been avoided if your spouse was included from the beginning. So I think it is really important, the disclosure of a family-based petition, which again, as Anshu mentioned, is not a problem, but does affect the timing and the strategy of how you want to process as a family, all needs to be brought up to your case manager, to the attorney handling your case, so that you can create a strategy. It's not as simple as, well, let's just file the I-140 and then see what happens later and adjust, because it does create delays, can create additional cost. And the delays today can be significant, because if retrogression happens and you would have been current in June and would have gotten an interview, but with retrogression, you're not now getting interviewed till November, all of a sudden that's a pretty big decision. So I just want to add that.
Thank you for adding that, Mike. And I think that's just good advice for anybody who's in a similar situation to Gary, and to bear that in mind. Always good to discuss these things up front, because your attorney and kinetics airmen will be able to help you strategize what's the best way in terms of your specific case and your specific situation. Mike, I'm just realizing something. Where are all the papers that are usually behind you on these shows?
Are
you telling us that you're not busy?
No, they're stacked up on a table in the corner.
Okay.
They're still there.
Okay, because Andrew, usually Mike has a lot of props behind him to kind of make us think that he's busy. So I don't know. I think he's like slacking or something with those three pieces of paper behind him.
They're right all over there.
Okay, good. We feel better, Mike. Okay, sorry. Just had to put that in the show. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So Hussein is saying hi. Lolo is saying hi. Naveen saying hi. Cram has a question. So Cram has a question, and I think, Andrew, you were talking about timelines, but Cram is saying, from I-140 approval, how long the fee bill should take. I was advised to wait 90 days. Andrew, you said a little earlier that it would be slightly less than that. Is there some variation on fee bills? Can you maybe clarify that?
There is, just like any answer, there's always a gray area. And so I think this is really dependent upon the service center that has your I-140, and you can't control where that I-140 is filed. So I want to make sure I'm clear on that. You cannot control where that I-140 is filed with the service center, but we've noticed that certain service centers tend to be quicker in terms of sending the actual petition to the NVC, right? Because the NBC has to get that petition before they then move forward and issue the fee bill. Now, the service center that I'm seeing the most issues with, and of course, Mike, jump in, is the Texas Service Center. And that is the service center where I'm seeing more delays. So where, where one service center is maybe taking 2 months, I'm seeing the Texas Service Center take 90 to 120 days. So there is a variance there. It's dependent upon the service center. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do in terms of changing where we can file your 140.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating for so many healthcare workers where, there are just so many variables and everybody's anxious to get to the next step as quickly as possible. But as Andrew says, there's certain things that are in our control and some things that aren't. And patience is really what's required as you move through this stressful and exciting process. Faisal is saying, I've recently received my 4-year degree, Bachelor's of Nursing. Congrats, Faisal. That's great news. Please go ahead, if you haven't already, and pass the NCLEX exam. And for those of you on the nursing side that don't know, the nursing exam, the NCLEX, is changing 1st of April. Next generation NCLEX. We've done a lot of shows on this topic. It's going to be a very different exam and maybe a little more difficult to pass. So hopefully if you haven't yet passed your NCLEX, Faisal, or anybody else who's just graduated, please take the NCLEX as soon as possible because there is going to be a change. And of course, I'm sure you'll pass it afterwards, but it just might make it a little bit more difficult. And please check out our shows. We have lots of shows on this topic. Okay, I'm going to jump around now because I'm watching the clock and we've got a lot of questions coming in and I haven't even got to the ones on my desk. Dr. Alyssa is saying my favorite topics. We're glad, Dr. Alyssa, that we are here to help. That's what Onwards and Upwards is all about. All right, I have a question here from Sarah. Sarah is asking, I have a 6-year-old son as my dependent. He is unvaccinated for COVID vaccine. We are resident here in Qatar, and unfortunately, they stopped giving vaccine for pediatric aged 12-year-olds and below, both government and private hospitals. No available vaccine until since September 2022. My question is there a possibility that the US Embassy will not approve our immigrant visa because my son is unvaccinated for COVID? I saw that the vaccine, there is a waiver for CDC guidelines for those cannot have vaccinations, but I cannot fully understand how it works or to whom it is applicable. Please help. Mike, do you want to maybe take that question?
Sure. Anshu gets the one that answers 4 to 6 weeks. I get the one about medical.
Mike, you know how it works. You get the more difficult questions, and I don't even want to hear a word about that.
Yeah, I think that the answer is kind of in your question, in that there is a waiver process. With any waiver process, there are not clear answers of you will get a waiver if A or if B or if C. We have historically in this world of immigration seen significant variations in what qualifies for a waiver in a variety of areas, not just medical issues. So whether or not they're going to say that that is sufficient, the country in which you're living, that the vaccine is unavailable to a 6-year-old is sufficient for the exercising of the waiver, or whether they're going to say that you are, and I'm just going to make this up, but you're eligible to travel to 12 other countries based upon your nationality, all of whom will provide the vaccines to minor children, means that you have a way to avoid the need for the waiver. I don't know the answer to that. I think that if it is a situation where you want to file the waiver, because that's the approach you want to take, that you're not going to try to get your child vaccinated because of the circumstances, then there's a couple things you should keep in mind. Number one, waiver processing is generally not fast. Waiver processing is generally not able to be issued by the examiner you meet at the window who takes your information. It often is not even eligible to be issued by that person's supervisor without going to another level. Sometimes waivers even go back to DC, to the Department of State, to kind of determine from a policy perspective what type of waiver should we be granting. So I say all that to say you can't control the timing of it, and number two, you cannot control the outcome of that. Until we see a history and a pattern of they're always giving waivers for this type of scenario, or they're never giving waivers for this type of scenario. And frankly, that'll be 2 years from now, maybe even longer, before we all see those patterns where enough things have happened just like yours to be able to give you a good answer as to this, that'll never work or it will work for sure. So those are the two things I'd keep in mind when you're talking about potentially doing a waiver. We have not had any situations like that yet. We've had one with a medical issue that was granted, but that's the only one we've had, but it was a medical issue, pretty well documented. Anshu, have you guys had any just like that or similar?
No, we have not run across that yet.
Yeah.
But the thing to bear in mind on that point, Mike, is that, that Sarah's in Qatar. So there probably are other nurses in Qatar that are going to experience the same thing with young children.
I would think so.
I'm glad we're covering that question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe what the individual could do is like just reach out to the embassy and see what their process is on that. Because like you said, Tanya, she can't be the only nurse in Qatar that's going through this issue. So maybe take that additional step, work with your attorney, and have them reach out to the embassy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for adding that, Anshu. Okay, we have a question here from Mark. I made a public inquiry regarding change of consulate. Since 3 weeks, no reply from the NBC. Can I make a follow-up via public forum again? Anshu, I think this is a little bit of an easier question, so I'm probably going to have to ask you two, because otherwise Mike's going to get upset.
Thank you.
Let's take that one first.
I appreciate that.
We aim to please, Mike.
So I think the first thing I always say is, just why are you, what is the reason to change the embassy? Yes, you can reach out to the embassy again to change your embassy. Actually, you should be reaching out to the NBC to change the embassy. But given that it takes so long to get these embassy interviews, have you taken that step to speak to your employer and the attorney handling your case before you change embassies? Because now you may get a quicker interview now, and if you change embassies, you could see a bigger delay in trying to get an interview. So just be mindful of that. Is that when you are trying to change embassies, know that that's probably going to cause a delay in you getting your green card and your interview.
Okay, thank you, Anshu. Good advice for all nurses. Don't change your consulate unless you absolutely have to. Dokia saying is a kinetics nurse. Hi, Dokia. Paul, we are happy to have you here. And Lisa from Philippines. Jessie's here again. I think we answered that question. I'm just Brenda from UK. So I'm just trying to look at the timing, as many questions as possible. So Iolo has a question. So Andrew, I have to give it to you because otherwise Mike's going to get upset.
It's okay.
How long does administrative processing take under EB3 category in the US Embassy?
Okay. Well, I think that's a really great question. I think like with any immigration process, there's a bit of unknown. And administrative processing is kind of like a security clearance. So you should have already had your interview, and the officer has the discretion to do a background check. Most of the time, that background check, it goes back about 10 to 15 years. And it's then sent to Washington, and then they will review it. From a timing perspective, we've seen in our office, of course, there's a range. It goes anywhere from 4 weeks to 120 days. And so again, it's discretionary, and unfortunately, there's no way to expedite this piece of it. And so you're just going to have to play that, being patient with the embassy. And as long as there's nothing concerning in your background, then you should really be fine. So I wouldn't be too concerned. Sometimes it just happens that the officer wants to do more background check on you.
some additional information maybe is needed.
Yes.
Thank you, Anshu. Hoda has a question. I have the fee holds, but my exam of IELTS mark is not ready. So, Huda, obviously you need to pass the English in order to get the visa screen and to become able to come to the United States. As a Kinetics USA nurse, we have the Kinetics Care Package, which is where we pay for the course for you to take to prepare you for the English exam. And thank goodness the CGFNS changed their requirements. I think it was August 1st last year, where they now will take other exams. So please consult with your Kinetics English specialist, and we will advise you maybe if you need to look at another English exam if you are not passing your English, because sometimes some people are more suited to one exam than the other, but some states don't accept it. So it really depends on the person, but really important to get that English behind you. And please keep watching the Kinetics College. So just a shout out to the Kinetics College. Every Monday we have free shows. This is free information for all healthcare workers from our amazing vendors, and Swish and Niners are the two vendors that we work with on the English side that have free classes for all international healthcare workers. But Kinetics workers, as I said, healthcare workers get a free course from us. This is our gift to all healthcare workers. Okay, Arlene is saying hi. Matthew is in the house. Cute. Okay, we've got a lot of retrogression questions. I know that we did answer those. Mike, we have a question from Mitch. Mitch is saying, I am a med tech and I will be coming on the H1 visa. Will I be getting a background? Will I be getting a background check and a medical, the same as nurses going on a green card? Mike, how does it work with H1s?
Okay, yeah, you do not do a medical exam. However, there is a background check that's done as part of all visa issuances by the U.S. consulate, but there is not a medical exam. And historically, non-immigrant visas have been given some priority, particularly of healthcare workers at a variety of consulates. So some of the delays, sometimes it can take quite a while to get a non-immigrant visa, depending on where you're at in the world. For example, India right now is better than it was, but it's still fairly backed up. But in most places, you can get through fairly quickly for a med tech.
Okay. And when you say fairly quickly, Mike, how long does it take if the med tech, and I'm not sure in this particular case, but if the med tech has got all the requirements met, how long once you file the H1 would that med tech be able to come through?
Yeah, most H1s are done for offshore workers, would be done under premium processing, which would mean that you're going to get an approval on your H1 in 3 weeks. And then it's simply a matter of going through the Department of State. There's a process you go through to actually schedule a visa. It's all done online. And in some consulates, realistically, you can have a visa appointment in a week.
Okay.
The consulates are certainly not that fast, but there are certainly some that are. And even during COVID, when a lot of consulates were closed and only handling what they called emergency cases, healthcare workers such as med techs were able to get visa appointments.
Okay.
So.
Sounds good. Okay. We have a question from Marin. Marin, I think, has actually posted this question before, and I think we've been working on this situation, Marin. I'm familiar with this one, your case. Can Kinetics or Hammond Group seek for a congressional help on my case? My attorney, Mr. Neiman, sent several expedite requests to the NBC and the embassy. NBC always rejects the request. There hasn't been any reply from the embassy. My state of chargeability is Kuwait, hence my PD is always current. NBC schedules interview for several friends from the Philippines, even without expediting, within 2 to 3 months after their case has been DQ'd, though my PD is current and DQ'd since March 20, and I'm not sure when it is, 2022, I think it is. Mike, can you maybe give Marin some insight? I know that we've been working behind the scenes on Marin's case. This was just a more unusual situation.
First of all, one comment about expediting. In my opinion, as we sit here today in March of 2023, expediting is meaningless. For a while, they were expediting everyone. And as that old saying goes, if you expedite everyone, you expedite no one. So there's, in my opinion, there's limited value in expediting right now. However, if you're in a situation where the consulate is not scheduling you in an interview, or you're not able to schedule an interview, depending on how the consulate's doing interviews, within the normal time that the consulate has. So if the consulate's normally taken, say, 5 months to issue an interview or 3 months, and you're outside that time frame and you've been able to unable to schedule, then there's something specific to you, not that consulate. And in this case, there's something specific to your case. And so that requires extra intervention. And the primary intervention is to the consulate directly, some to the NVC, but to the consulate directly. As far as asking for congressional help can be helpful in certain situations, but generally is more helpful with broader trends, such as what's going on in Kenya, where we're having problems getting anyone scheduled. Then the consulate tends, or the congressional offices tend to take a little more attention to that. So generally speaking, a follow-up, an inquiry, some type of action every 30 to 45 days to 60 days is appropriate. And normally we attempt to do a kind of what everybody might refer to as kind of a shotgun approach, consulate, NVC, Department of State, just a variety of things to try to unleash what it is that is holding you back, whether it's a misclassification and they think you're an other worker, or whether it is they don't have your country of chargeability to correct, or they don't have, there could be a variety of things that could be happening in their system such that what we all see, they don't see. We see you as an EB3 RN, they see you as an other worker, CNA or something like that. Who knows? And none of us have, eyes on their system to see what it is that's holding it back. So all you can continue to do is continue to pursue that as often, as frequently as possible, and in the hopes that it will at some point be freed up fairly quickly.
Thank you, Mike. And Mirren, really, my heart goes out to you because I know how stressful this has been for you. And please know that we are watching this very carefully, that as Mike said, we are trying all different measures to see what the holdup is on your particular case. It's been a very unfortunate, unusual situation, but my heart goes out to you. And I just want to reassure you that we are doing everything that we can, both ourselves as well as the Hammond Group, to help you and make sure we get you to the United States. So thank you for your patience, and we will continue the good fight. Florence is saying, hi, Tanya, my question wasn't answered. And I know there have been a lot of retrogression questions, but I think we answered most of them. So I want to just clarify this one for Florence. If interview date has been given, but the retrogression happens, what will happen, Anshu?
So again, anyone that doesn't have an immigrant visa stamp in their passport is affected by retrogression. So let's kind of make that clear. You have to be current, meaning your priority date has to be current to be able to receive that visa stamp. So look at the visa bulletin, look at your priority date, and if you are retrogress, then you won't be able to move forward. So the fact that you are not locked in simply because you are DQ'd, or even if you have your interview scheduled. It's unfortunate, but the only individuals that are not affected are those that already have an immigration visa stamp in their passport, and the priority date must be current on the date you received your visa stamp. So there's also a slight distinction there as well.
Okay, thank you, Anshu. Mike, AB is asking, are you able to share insight into how embassy scheduling actually works, like the different tiers for family, visa, employment, etc.? It is confusing.
Well, I think the reality is that right now there is no system that's considered normal. And the reason why is because of COVID and all of the closures and all of the fact that only certain cases, i.e. healthcare workers for the most part, were given priority to get visa appointments. In family cases, were simply not. And in some cases, family cases were backed up for a couple years. So you have different reactions from different consulates on what they consider to be priorities. You had some announcements from Mexico City about we're going to prioritize family-based cases because they've been in line for 2 years. And then you had the Department of State saying something else. And it's an ever-moving target as to what they are prioritizing. I also believe, I don't know that this is true, but this is my belief, is that the Department of State creates priorities and says, do it this way. And then individual embassies kind of change it a little bit based upon what they believe is appropriate at their particular embassy. And they do it in subtle ways that we don't necessarily know. So don't assume that because you're in a family-based case like the individual previously, Gary's spouse, is not going to get an interview, and it's an individualized thing. As Anshu mentioned earlier, knowing that category, knowing that priority date is critical to an analysis of whether your case is going to go forward. So this is one of those things that it's nice to read when the Department of State puts out its information about these are the way we're prioritizing things. But the reality is, unless that affects you, unless you're getting your interviewed, it doesn't really matter what the Department of State says. So I frankly would be less concerned about how that's being done. What we do know right now is that nurses are being consistently interviewed at all consulates throughout the world, that the process is certainly much better than it was a year and a half ago, with some sense of returning to normalcy. But to be honest, I don't think we're going to know what normal is for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure Anshu's nodding her head. She agrees. We definitely have seen improvement, so there's a lot of hope. And the timings have definitely gone back to more of a normal, in quotes, kind of time period. Anshu, how long, if somebody files an I-140 today, obviously the prevailing wage is back, how long are you seeing an EB3 consular green card taking?
So I think
on average.
So I think they're inconsistent times, and let me explain why. It's based on a couple of factors, but I'll give you a range because I like to give ranges. I think we see inconsistent processing times from the service center. So based on that, remember, they're like the first step of this, because if they are slower than another service center, it's going to take longer for you to get your fee bill, right? So that can take sometimes months. I think also local embassies themselves are backlogged. They're either shut down due to like staffing or maybe holidays or disasters, or certain embassies just tend to move a little bit slower than others, like I had mentioned earlier about London. But I would think anything under 6 to 8 months is not unusual to go from, I-140 approval to visa interview. I think if it starts getting, and again, your priority date has to be current. I think if it's anything beyond 8 months, then that's probably where you want to make sure you're getting your employer and the attorney that's handling your case involved, so that they can send inquiries if needed.
Okay, thank you, Anshu. And that's really good news for anybody who's embarking on this journey right now. Charlotte is asking how to apply kinetics. What are the requirements? Thanks for the answer. Charlotte, you would go to the Kinetics USA website and apply. We have a team on hand that are waiting right now to speak to you. And if you look at the Kinetics USA website, you can see our success path, which really gives you all of the steps that you need to take as you move along the success path in navigating to get to the United States. So this is the success path for nurses who are coming through on an EB3 green card route. And obviously, if you're doing an adjustment of status green card or coming on a TN visa, or if you may be a med tech coming on an H1, this route would be slightly different. But this is the route if you are a nurse coming on an EB3 green card. And we have more opportunities than we've ever had, ever. And I mean, I was an immigrant. I came here 22 years ago from South Africa. We, have been doing this for many, many years, brought through thousands of nurses. We have requirements all over the United States. If you want to be in a big city, a small town, a climate with 4 seasons, only a warm climate. If you're looking for a big hospital, a small town, a big town, if you're a new grad and don't have experience, or you have 25 years of experience, we have opportunities for you. So please apply, and we'd love to help you. I'm just watching the clock, and my heart always starts like beating at this stage, because I really want to try and get through as many questions as possible. I know as an immigrant what it's like, that you want your answers questioned. So please know, everybody, I'm trying to get through as many as possible while we've got the experts here. So we have a question from Seema. Seema is asking, are nurse aide cases getting rejected in perm filings by the USCIS? What is the success rate of nurse aides, Mike?
Yeah, I've not seen any rejections at the I-140 stage, which would be the USCIS processing. Nurse aides go through a different process than RNs do, in that nurse aides have to go through the perm process, the ETA 9089 and a recruitment campaign. And the only way cases would be rejected at that stage is if the employer, the recruitment campaign, was successful. They found U.S. workers that were available and willing to do the work. And generally that's not the case with NA positions. So we've not seen any issues. The biggest factor for NA positions is the fact that they generally fall under the other worker category, which is already retrogressed. And so the time it takes to go from an I-140 approval to actually get an interview and a green card is pretty significant. And growing. And so I think we're going to see less NA cases being processed going forward, unless there's some change in legislation with that particular other worker category.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I am watching, I'm just looking at the chat, and I'm just, I wish I could ask every question here. So I apologize if I'm not able to get to your question. But I wanted to just cover, there was a question here that I saw about unions and premium processing, Anshu, and I'm just trying to find it as we're speaking, because I think that this is something that does affect quite a few people. If you are being sponsored by a hospital that is a union hospital, are there any differences in the process? And does that affect the case in any way, Anshu?
So there is. So the way I kind of explain is that there's like these pre-filing steps, your PWD and your notice posting. And so this stage is not really tied to a nurse. It's really tied to the employer. So once that prevailing wage determination is certified by the Department of Labor, the next step would be to post the posting notice. And essentially it's like a 1-page document. Usually it has information about the position, how much is being offered for the position, where the position is located. And so that notice posting usually is then sent to the facility and is posted for 10 business days. And then it's sent back and is included as part of your I-140 filing. Now, with union positions, it's slightly different. You actually have to send it for, I think it is 10 days, but the timeline of it is different, which requires it to be delayed a little bit. And so, at most, I think there's usually like a 1 month to 45-day delay. But the good news is that you can still file your case premium processing. So even if you're going to a union facility, the posting process is a little bit different, and it does cause a little bit of a delay. But with that being said, you can still file your case premium.
Okay. Thank you, Anshu. So at that point, we are at the end of the show. This was such fun. I'm so sorry that it's come to an end, and I apologize to everyone that if I didn't get to your question. Mike and Anshu have kindly agreed that they will go into the chat afterwards and answer any questions that we weren't able to get to. And our team will also collect questions, and we will try and get to them in next month's session, because our immigration experts will be back next month for our legal Q&A. So I want to thank Anshu and Mike for joining us today. And before you leave, please don't forget the upcoming shows. We have coming up on our shows Onwards and Upwards every Friday. Next week, we have a full show on Pearson PTE. This is going to be a really interesting show. We have nurses coming on, sharing their experience. We have the vendors for PTE coming on. So a lot of good information there. On the 31st, we'll be doing stateside, and this month we'll be targeting Pennsylvania, what it's like to live and work in Pennsylvania. On the 7th, our topic is immigrating with the U.S. with children to the United States. On the 14th, we have a financial show, budgeting for U.S. arrival. On the 21st, we have our client showcase, where we're showcasing one of our clients. And on the 28th, Mike and Anshu will be back for the next immigration Q&A. And on the Lafora Talk Show, which we do once a month, on the 11th, we're talking about next generation NCLEX. I see a lot of questions about NCLEX in the chat, so please make sure to watch those shows. Also, the Kinetics College. Every Monday, we work with our aspired esteemed vendors. We love working with Aspire, iPass, Swish, and Niners, this is free classes for all healthcare workers on NCLEX as well as English classes. And then last but not least, the Kinetics initiatives. Don't forget, all Kinetics nurses or Kinetics healthcare workers get a free English scholarship. This is our gift to Kinetics nurses. We have a free NCLEX scholarship for selected nurses. Our $1,000 referral fee extended until March 31st. Please listen to our podcast, Nursing in America. We have a direct hire program, Onwards and Upwards, Kinetics College, and also have many opportunities for allied workers. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to our friends, Mike and Anshu. See you next week, everybody. Have a great weekend. Onwards and Upwards.
Thanks, Anshu.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.